Hello and welcome to our City Benchmarking for Commercial Real Estate webinar. My name is Emily Dretzka, Onboarding Coordinator at Gobi. In today's webinar, we will discuss the landscape of current energy policies, including benchmarking and transparency laws across the U.S., emerging city programs and policies, data benchmarking and submission to the Energy Star Portfolio Manager, best practices on going beyond benchmarking and making your compliance data actionable, and we will finish with a case study on how mandatory city benchmarking fueled a comprehensive energy management plan for Mark Realty, a preeminent commercial real estate company. The session today will be recorded and sent to all participants. Today's session will run about 45 minutes in length, and we've left time at the end of the presentation for questions. Please feel free to use the chat feature to submit any questions during the presentation. I would now like to introduce our speakers, Julie Hughes and Celia Landisberg. As Director of Policy for IMT and co-director of the City Energy Project, Julie works to develop public policy solutions that address market barriers to energy efficiency. Julie served as policy advisor in the Department of Energy's Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy prior to her work at IMT. She believes that the best solutions to tough energy problems are jointly informed by the private and public sectors. Julie began her career in PricewaterhouseCoopers' international climate change practice before uncovering a passion for local governments that have big, bold sustainability goals. Julie helped advance Mayor Bloomberg's energy goals in NYC as Chief of Staff for Energy Policy within the NYC Economic Development Corporation. Her first stint in local government involved working on housing and buildings policies under Mayor O'Malley's administration in Baltimore City. Celia Landisberg is an account manager at Gobi. Celia earned her bachelor's degree in environmental studies and in geography from the University of Richmond, where she also spent years tackling campus sustainability initiatives from LEED certification to greenhouse gas inventories. Celia came to Gobi nearly 3 years ago and has worked with over 1,000 buildings across numerous portfolios. As an account manager, Celia oversees business strategy of Gobi's key accounts to help each customer achieve continued success and performance improvement. Julie, the stage is yours.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, today I want to talk a little bit about energy benchmarking in general in terms of just what it is and how it's being used, how the data is being used by cities to motivate action and making improvements to buildings, and give you a little more information about where you can learn more about this topic if it's of interest to you. So one of the problems we all know with energy efficiency is that it's invisible to the marketplace. It's very hard to look at two buildings side by side that have similar attributes, are of a similar vintage, and have similar qualities and tell which of those buildings is more energy efficient. Yet this information is really important to people who are looking to lease or buy space in a building or invest in the building overall. So we're all used to seeing on appliances Energy Star labels that give you very clear information about how that appliance stacks up compared to other similar appliances and what your estimated savings would be if you bought that appliance. And there's nothing that is as visible or has been with regards to buildings. Energy Star scores and certifications are, of course, available to buildings, but there's no outward labeling, so it's obviously it's often hard for consumers to find this information. And city policies, such as benchmarking and transparency policies, are aiming to overcome this market barrier. So the way benchmarking and transparency generally works, building owners are required to report on their annual energy consumption. They use EPA's Energy Star Portfolio Manager, which is a free tool to do that. That information then goes to the city, and local government uses that to develop programs geared towards the building owners and the private sector to stimulate investment in that in buildings and to help service providers and product providers basically expand their businesses by serving the energy efficiency needs. That information is then made transparent to the marketplace so that those who I just mentioned, the prospective tenants and buyers and investors in buildings, can see how energy efficient a building is and how it compares to its peers. That in turn should generate more demand for efficiency and should drive the market so that energy efficiency in buildings is appropriately valued. This map shows cities that have undertaken, and states that have undertaken benchmarking and transparency policies. It's been common for many years for city and state governments to require energy benchmarking of their own properties. Municipal buildings have used various financial mechanisms to finance improvements in their properties, and those are pretty well established. Newer to the market, although many cities have had these policies in place for a handful of years, is the benchmarking requirements for commercial and multifamily buildings. So just quickly looking at this map, the orange dots are those cities that have commercial and multifamily building policies in addition to a public building requirement. The green dots only require commercial and public buildings and not multifamily. So multifamily is often a segment of the market that's included after policy is established that applies to commercial buildings. So just a couple of, I'm going to tell you a couple stories or give you a little detail about some cities that have recently passed benchmarking laws, because there's a trend happening for sure where more cities are adopting this and at a much more accelerated rate than was happening previously. So the City Energy Project, a lot of these cities are part of the City Energy Project, through which the cities are developing locally appropriate suites of policies and programs to advance energy efficiency in their built environments. So Denver, for example, is consistent with the principles of the City Energy Project and things that IMT really likes to see. Went through extensive market engagement with the real estate sector in order to define their policy. And what the city originally had in mind was actually substantially different than the policy that ultimately had approval of the real estate sector and then was passed through City Council. So it was a great example, though, of a real estate task force being developed that establishes a strong working relationship with the city and really informed the city of what would work for them. And we think that that's a great thing, because passing a policy that no one complies with doesn't generate much investment in buildings, nor does it nor does it really inspire people to act and improve energy efficiency. Another City Energy Project city, Los Angeles, one thing that's unique about their policy is that it has multiple pathways for compliance that does not penalize poor performing buildings, such that one of the compliance pathways basically enables a building that undergoes improvement or puts in place operational improvement and improves its ENERGY STAR score. That type of action is rewarded so that, like I said, poor performing buildings aren't necessarily penalized, but are encouraged and rewarded for improving. They also did some really great coordination with the entity that oversees the Better Buildings Challenge participation in their city. So that's the DOE, Department of Energy Better Buildings Challenge, through which public and private sector signs up to implement a certain energy and carbon reduction goal by a certain date. It's a great way for the real estate community to kind of test out these benchmarking requirements and to see the benefits before a policy is passed and implemented. They also did, which other cities are following in their footsteps, a really extensive stakeholder process that involved 8 meetings. It was very well communicated up front, and each of the meetings focused on a different topic. So the private sector or the public in general could see what elements of policy and voluntary programs are going to be discussed at what meeting, and they could selectively choose where they would, when they would show up to provide their input. Atlanta, it has had a policy in place for a couple of years, but one interesting thing about their policy is the extent to which it includes water audits. Water is a really precious and expensive resource in the Atlanta area, so some cities are using these policies to address things that are a variety of priorities in addition to just energy. Orlando and St. Louis are both unique in the deep relationships that they've established with their local utilities. Orlando has a municipal utility, for example, so that's kind of unique in and of itself. And that utility is providing subsidies for audits for building owners so that they can really see what improvements would make a difference in their buildings. The trend that I mentioned is illustrated here with the showing the amount of square footage that's covered by benchmarking and transparency laws across the country. And that pipeline is reflective of cities that we know of who are contemplating building energy policies. So this is becoming something that, especially in larger cities with a lot of large buildings, is becoming increasingly common, and almost a sense of sort of inevitability around it, because almost all large cities have aggressive climate and energy saving goals. And with those, looking at commercial buildings and multifamily buildings are responsible for a large percentage of emissions. In many cities, it can be up to 70 or 75% of emissions attributable to commercial buildings. So just pointing out that that's one reason that starting in that sector is a really obvious place. The impact of these policies has also been shown, and these are 3 cities where we recently looked at, for the same buildings over the course of 3 years of reporting, what kind of decrease were they seeing in their energy use intensity. And the decrease ranged from 4 to almost 8%, and that's pretty significant. And so a conclusion that we would draw is that the increased awareness that this information is providing to building owners, and the things that these cities are doing to make that information understandable and actionable, are translating into real improvement and carbon and energy savings. One city that has done this especially proactively and well is New York City. So they passed their policy about 10 years ago, and just a demonstration that this really takes a while. Now, although the mayor who passed this policy, Mayor Bloomberg, is no longer in office, these efforts have continued and have more and more support from the private sector. They have a variety of programs that they've built up to support building owners who are complying with these policies, and they're doing a lot of proactive outreach to those building owners to make them aware of opportunities for improvement and of some of the incentives and assistance that they can avail themselves of. One of those programs is the New York City Retrofit Accelerator. Through this program, the city really looked at what are the things that are motivating people to invest in their buildings that might not necessarily be energy efficiency. We know that that is not always the driver. Energy efficiency is sometimes a helpful byproduct of other types of investments, and it's only one thing that building owners are considering because they have a lot of competing priorities. Some of the criteria that they learned building owners were thinking about were, for one, resilience of their buildings, especially with Superstorm Sandy having come through and demonstrated that there was a need for increased resilience of buildings. Energy efficiency improvements that also strengthen or fortify a building are of special interest. So the city is looking at what buildings are in floodplains, for example. They're also looking at what buildings might have financial need to a greater extent than other buildings. So they can look at multifamily buildings, for example, and see which buildings have some kind of public assistance, and those might be ones where there's an indicator that financial assistance would increase the likelihood that that building owner would invest in energy efficiency. So they look at a variety of different criteria, and then what they do is pick up the phone and call the building owner and say, because of the data that you've been reporting from the benchmarking and audit requirements, we have this information about your building that would indicate that you have great opportunity for savings associated with energy efficiency. If you're interested, these are some of the things that we would recommend, and here are some incentives that are available to help bring down the cost of that. And they're working very closely with the utility, with Con Ed. Sometimes the utilities aren't necessarily using benchmarking and audit data because they only have access to some of it, just the data that's publicly available. But even the publicly available information might not be so actively used by them. So we're trying to also, through cities' efforts and through our own efforts, highlight to utilities and program administrators the opportunity that they have to better target their programs and have higher conversion rates by factoring in some of this data from the start. This is an illustration of one of the ways that building owners that cities are making information more accessible and publicly available. The City of Philadelphia and several others have invested in visualization tools through which the public can go in and look at the energy efficiency, or the energy performance of particular properties and compare one to another. This is two snapshots, one of Seattle's report that they started piloting several years ago and are now providing to building owners. It gives them information about how they compare to other buildings that are similar in the area. It also provides, on the backside of this sheet, which you can't see, it provides information about incentives that that building specifically would be eligible for, again, to try to increase investment and bring the cost of that investment down, increase the payback for the building owner. The snapshot on the right is for the City of Chicago, a scorecard that they send to building owners that also illustrates, where they stand and provides some additional recommendations on what they could do. We've heard some anecdotal evidence that the city has received calls from service and product providers that have the ability to improve the efficiency of a building, and they care very much about the timing with which these scorecards go out, and after they go out, they use them essentially as a lead generator for business in calling the building owners, because they have kind of a heightened awareness at that time of their energy performance, and it's good conditions for a service provider to sell. So we like to see that kind of market stimulation that's resulting from a city government practice. One of the barriers for building owners, unfortunately, is getting access to whole building data from utilities. If you have multiple tenants in your building, it's not very feasible to gather their energy consumption or energy bill from all of those individual tenants. You have to get waivers from them. It's obviously an administrative nightmare. And so the answer is your utility providing you with information about the entire building's energy consumption. That's not easy for them because they generally have outdated utility or IT systems that are costly to fix. They're worried about privacy concerns, and rightfully so, because they have excellent track records in protecting the personally identification information of individuals, their customers. And then for them to make investments, they need cost recovery for those investments. That often requires sending those through a rate case, which only happens every couple of years. So it's not easy, but we are seeing some great movement in that area. Just illustrating the privacy concerns that they have. They don't want anyone to be able to discern what is necessarily going on within a building or a tenant space. The more the data is aggregated, and particularly for commercial buildings that have more kind of routine patterns of consumption, that's where you have the least privacy concerns. If you start getting towards data that's delivered more frequently, like real-time or 15-minute interval data, you start increasing that level of concern, and the number of units, the lower you go, the more you could potentially discern from that data. So this is where the utility is coming from in that kind of discussion. Here's an example of utility ComEd that is providing automatic uploading of whole building data into Energy Star Portfolio Manager, which is really a best practice and one that several other utilities are getting on board and working on in conjunction with building owners and cities. If you are looking to find out whether you can get whole building data from your utility, EPA has put out this resource where you plug in your zip code and it will tell you what data you can get from your electric and gas utilities. Department of Energy recently did an energy data accelerator, they called it, where there were 23 pairs of cities and utilities that were working on breaking down the barriers to energy data access and coming up with some pretty creative solutions. There are a bunch of best practices and case studies on this website. The stakeholder engagement guide down at the bottom talks about how to engage a utility, what some of the perspectives and priorities are of the various stakeholders, so that you can enter into a conversation with a great understanding of the landscape. You can get more information on on benchmarking and transparency and policies, also audit policies, retro-commissioning, sub-metering, any policy that affects the efficiency of the built environment on buildingrating.org. This is a website that IMT maintains where you can dig into a lot of detail on various policies. Also, if you're wondering what the policy might be in a city that you operate in, this is a great place to go to dig up the details of what buildings are required to report. And that's it for my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. So this is Celia talking now. Thanks, Julie, for that great information. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the city benchmarking landscape, as well as how to do more with the information. So a little bit about Gobi as some background. Our roots come from real estate and consulting. Our founders and executives from Ariba, PwC, and JLL. We are funded by Green Soil in the Green Building Innovation Fund. Again, those roots in real estate with a major focus on technology to improve access to utility and sustainability data for the real estate sector. So how to remove the burden and automate the processes associated with complying with ordinances, achieving certifications, and taking action. So we partner with many reporting organizations and industry standards, which you'll see at the bottom of this slide, to help our customers capture the data once and then use it to report anywhere. So you'll see all of these different silos on the screen representing the different data sets in real estate, which many are difficult to access and then difficult to bring together into one central location. So that's really what Gobi is focused on in terms of getting the information and bringing it into our platform, that commercial real estate cloud. So our main solutions are invoice automation, energy management, and sustainability reporting. Invoice automation focused on automating data from utility providers, whether that's your whole building information, landlord information, or any other data that you need to collect on an ongoing basis. Energy management, which is focused on understanding your variances, focused on understanding the different factors that impact that, so your weather, your occupancy, and any other kind of impact to your consumption and bottom line. And then sustainability reporting, which is focused on complying with any industry standards, achieving recognition and certification, and then reporting out to any external stakeholders. So as the industry grows and changes and new standards are introduced, using the information to meet all of the requirements. So for the purpose of today, we're focusing on city benchmarking in the industry. So I'm going to run through kind of what do you need to comply, what are your options to get it done, what are some challenges that you might incur along the way, how can you get help with it, and then how do you go beyond benchmarking? How do you take the information and actually make a change? So to start off with, what do you need to get it done? 12 months of that whole building data that Julie spoke about, in terms of some of it being tenant data, maybe some of it being, non-landlord controlled operations. So accessing all of that. Basic building information, so looking at what space types are at the property, what are the operating hours for each of those spaces, and what was the occupancy through the year. And Energy Star and the cities are going to use that information to create your building profile and show kind of what that performance score is. So using that to benchmark your property against a national median, and using occupancy and weather as normalization factors to give your property the most fair performance rating. And then the last thing is your local requirements. So what are your city-specific deadlines, city-specific requirements in terms of square footage, professional engineering verification, and any additional exemption information of who might not be included. So there are three main ways to comply with the ordinances. So you can go for it on your own at a property level. If you have one person or a couple people that want to take on collecting the utility data and reporting it. You can appoint a team member in your region. If you have a group of properties in Chicago and you want one person to manage all of those submissions, you can do it that way. Or you can engage with a third party, Gobi, to help you get it done more efficiently, remove the burden from your team members, and ensure across the board you're in compliance. So what are the challenges that you might incur at a building level? So data collection is certainly your first obstacle in terms of how do we figure out what data we need and then how to get it. If there are any ownership changes or management changes throughout the past year, how to find the information and then get the appropriate authorizations, any specific utility requirements on authorization, understanding exactly what signatures or who needs to know in order to get it. And then once you get that information, how do you validate it? How do you ensure that you're optimizing your profile with those building info inputs so that when you do go to report, you are putting your building in the most fair and most accurate way forward, so that the way the city is looking at it and the way Energy Star is looking at it and any other reporting initiatives are giving you the best score possible. At a portfolio level, you're going to incur the same challenges for each property, and then rolled up, you're looking at a bigger scale of organizing across multiple requirements, keeping a calendar of when each deadline is, what all of those requirements are in terms of asset classes or square footage or professional engineering requirements. So really the large challenge here is portfolio visibility in terms of, at the end of benchmarking season, how can I go back and be sure that we got every single submission in on time and accurately. So if you have multiple people doing this at multiple different sites, it can get kind of messy pretty fast. But the good news is that Gobi can help. As I mentioned at the beginning, we're focused on getting the data, so making it easier for you to automate information and remove burden from any team members in terms of data collection, so that the people on the ground, the managers, the operators, the owners can start using the data in a platform, in Gobi's platform, to compare against different metrics and then share the data internally, as well as push that data to external stakeholders, those reporting initiatives, Energy Star, so that you can start getting recognition for the work you've achieved. So as the experts, we have completed over 700 benchmarking submissions across the country, which is increasing every year as a testament to both the landscape that's changing in terms of more and more cities passing ordinances each year. So I think alone so far in 2017, there have been maybe 6 new ordinances. So we'll see that number go up again this year. And also, we've mastered the process for each city. We know the most efficient way to get the information, meet the requirements, and get it done so that team members on the ground can focus on what matters, which is getting results from this information, not just checking a box to say that you complied. So going beyond benchmarking and finding opportunities to increase the energy efficiency and get recognition. So a report from the IMT came out that shows that 70% of facility managers are using benchmarking information to guide their decisions on what energy efficiency projects to evaluate and then to move forward with. So how to take the information, measure your efficiency, and create a plan to get better. So keeping those operating expenses down and keeping your cash flow strong. Additionally, this opens the opportunity to participate in optional city challenges. As Julie said, many cities have aggressive carbon and energy reduction goals. And so in pursuit of those, they engage with the private sector to improve the performance of all properties and invite them to participate in these challenges, which creates an opportunity for recognition at the property and portfolio level, and also opens up access to resources, financing, and other programs that might exist with the city and with the utility. So these are some of the challenges, the city challenges that Gobi has helped support with participation in and seeing great results. So if you're interested, I encourage you to reach out for more information. We can share some of those as well if you are interested in participating in any of these. So along with, just participating in city benchmarking from the beginning, it's shown that there's about an average of 7% in energy savings over 3 years just from participating. And so what you're seeing on the slide here is the correlation between the number of city benchmarking submissions each year and the number of Energy Star awards given. So now that properties each year are getting access to their information and being able to use that throughout the year, they're receiving more and more recognition from Energy Star by hitting that 75 mark and having their award given to them so that they can put that stamp on their building that says, I am much better than my competition, 75% or more. And so one customer that we work closely with is Realty, and they've seen a lot of success from engaging with Gobi. They got their start, they were founded in 1976. They're a full-service commercial real estate company providing ownership, management, and leasing of the best located office buildings in Chicago and the suburbs. And their portfolio is of over 40 buildings. And they came to Gobi with a problem. They didn't have a tool to visualize their portfolio energy projects and determine where information is being useful, and their utility bills were living in drawers. And they wanted to use this ordinance as a way to get access to better information about their portfolio. So they came to Gobi, and we helped them solve for how to identify and prioritize opportunities, and then help them capitalize on opportunities to get building recognition through Energy Star awards, and also overall streamline the city benchmarking compliance. So removing burden from team members, allowing them to focus on day-to-day operations and how to make improvements to their properties. So what you'll see is when Realty started with us in 2014, in just 2 years, they saw their number of Energy Star awards double. So this year they were excited to hit double digits, and we're excited to see that number continue to go up. But just kind of further visualizing how these benchmarking ordinances are helping people receive recognition and make improvements all the time. So looking at the big picture, zooming back out from a portfolio to the real estate industry as a whole, looking at regulations and where buildings sit on this sustainability performance curve, we see benchmarking ordinances as a way to raise the baseline and raise the benchmark for where buildings are performing, and then allowing everyone to participate in making the building stock perform better. So we'll always have kind of industry leadership, people using innovative technologies to improve the performance of their properties, but benchmarking has opened up a whole new kind of middle of this chart that allows everyone on the ownership management side to take advantage of city resources, utility resources, and start to use their information to run better buildings. So I want everyone to kind of come away from this with feeling empowered by benchmarking, and that accessing this data is a way to, take the first step in improving your building and portfolio performance. So with that, that kind of wraps up my section. So you'll see my contact information on the page here if you want to reach out to me personally. I encourage you to ask any questions also via the chat feature. So thank you everyone for joining today.
Great, thank you so much, Celia and Julie. That was an excellent presentation, very enlightening into current benchmarking practices. So with that, we're going to go ahead and take a few questions. This first one will probably be best addressed by you, Julie, and it is, how do I know if I need to comply with an audit or retro-commissioning requirement?
One way to tell would be to look at the website buildingrating.org. It has information about all of the policies that have been passed and implemented nationwide, so you can simply look at the cities that you're interested in and look for the threshold of building size that's required to report. Most cities start with requirements of the largest buildings reporting and then kind of ratchet down the thresholds year after year from there. So all of the detail that you need should be on that site. If not, you feel free to contact IMT and we can help you.
Great, thank you. Another question we received, Celia, this is probably good for you. How often do I have to benchmark within my city?
So typically the ordinances are annual, so each year on the same date, your information for the previous calendar year would be due to the city.
Excellent, thank you. And another question we've received is, how do I know if my city is planning to pass a benchmarking requirement? Celia, I'll turn that one over to you as well.
Yeah, so cities are actively working on rolling out policies typically as part of a larger sustainability or reduction plan. So I encourage you to use the resources that Julie's talked about. So buildingrating.org is great to see updates and progress from cities. I also encourage you to reach out to the GOBI team. We're typically highly involved in knowing when these ordinances are coming so we can help everyone prepare accordingly. So feel free to reach out to GOBI as well.
Excellent, thank you. So with that, I think that concludes our Q&A as well as today's webinar on city benchmarking for commercial real estate. And we thank you very much for your time and have a great rest of your day.